Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Think Before You Hate podcast, where we'll discuss the latest topics on civil rights here in the city of Chicago. I'm Alex with the Chicago Commission on Human Relations, and what we do is work diligently to fight discrimination and prejudice here in the city of Chicago. Today we have the great pleasure of speaking with Raymond Chang, who will educate us on Asian hate and violence in Chicago. He is the president of the Asian American Christian Collaborative. And without further ado, Mr. Chang, thank you very much for hopping on today and joining us for this podcast. Will you please introduce yourself to the audience and let us know, where'd you grow up? Who is Raymond Chang?
Yeah, well, Alex, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be together. My name is Raymond. I am a pastor and author and advocate, and the work I do is to lead the Asian American Christian Collaborative, which is a national organization that's based in Chicago, which is really advancing and advocating for Asian Americans and Asian American Christians, but we really care about all people's flourishing. And so the work that we do is around advocacy, community building, and then education and equipping. And we really want to help people understand the unique contributions that Asian Americans play in the broader society, especially Asian American Christians. I grew up in the Chicagoland, all over. Most of my younger years were in the Koreatown, or now known as historic Koreatown area. But I've lived all over the world. I've lived in Korea, Hawaii, Guatemala, Panama, Spain, China,
Nice.
LA. But Chicago kind of is my kind of town.
Right on. Perfect. I just want to know, how did a pastor get interested in working to combat hate?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, because a lot of my convictions emerge from my faith. One of the things I love about faith in general, regardless of what you believe in, is that it points you to something higher. But my specific Christian convictions point me to truly love God and love neighbor. And one of the things I'm realizing, especially as I read through the Bible, I look at the statistics and the studies and read sociological, psychological texts, read anthropological texts, read the newspaper, and then just listening to the pain of the people around me and the pain of those that I see and I don't see, and those that are often unseen, I realized hate against anyone is hate against everyone. And especially out of my faith conviction, my call is not just to offer verbal sympathies or empathies, but to actually get involved, roll up my sleeves, and advocate with and for different communities that are afflicted and impacted by different forms of hate. And so we work broadly with a broad coalition of different communities in order to do so. And that's one of the privileges that I have.
Oh, perfect. Now, do you think the media is playing a role in exacerbating or combating hate, specifically anti-Asian hate?
Absolutely. I mean, media shapes, how we see things. So what's portrayed, what's not portrayed, how things are portrayed, how things aren't portrayed, make a big impact on our social imaginations. And so a lot of times for Asian Americans, we often feel like we are the sidekick or we are the afterthought. We're fetishized if you're a woman in our community. We all know kung fu, and we're all good at math, and now we might all be crazy rich and academically oriented. But what's concerning about portrayals is not necessarily that there are different portrayals that are out there, but how they limit our imagination, how people perceive others. And so that's kind of what we're concerned about in terms of media, is that there's not an expansive representation of the breadth of Asian Americans in the U.S. And because of that, we're often limited to the stereotypes that are imposed on us.
Gotcha. So, with all that being said, in your opinion, what are some of the unique challenges Asian Americans face when navigating life in Chicago or society at large?
Yeah,
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think that there are, to what we were just talking about, there are pervasive stereotypes that just seem to stick and not go away. We're considered the model minority, where we are viewed as keeping our head down, not rocking the boat, not really having an opinion about really important things, being good at math, and just hardworking. And those are sometimes positive, those are not negative traits, but sometimes they're very limiting. It doesn't allow for us to be creative, or it doesn't allow us to even be rebellious in the right ways, to break the mold in many times. And so oftentimes when we do speak up, we're punished twice as much as if we hadn't speaked up, or twice as much as other people who do speak up on a regular basis or are expected to speak up. We experience the perpetual foreigner syndrome, right, where no matter how many generations we're here, we're never American enough. So even in the Chicago Chinatown area, there are seventh generation that I know personally, Asian Americans, that still get treated as if they have just come off the plane from O'Hare Airport and are trying to navigate society for the first time. And so no matter what, they're treated as if they're not an American, when they, in a lot of ways, have been here for longer than many other white Americans, for example.
Sure.
And then, of course, we are constantly plagued with this kind of sense of Orientalism, which fixates who we are into like a particular time and a place. So think of like China dolls or like Oriental rugs, for example. Like when people think of Asian Americans, sometimes they kind of limit us to a particular space, time period, and expression. And if you add that to the persistent kind of voluntary segregation that we experience in not just the city of Chicago, but throughout the whole country. It just is a real thing where communities are segregated by race and continue to be segregated by race, to the point that zip codes are oftentimes a significant indicator of whether someone, quote unquote, succeeds or does not succeed in life. Mm-hmm. We know that segregation has persisted and continues to maintain as a significant challenge. And of course, there are language barriers, which, one of the beautiful things about the U.S. Is how multiple languages can coexist and add to the beautiful mosaic of what we know as not just the United States, but the city of Chicago.
Sure.
I mean, I love the fact that we have a Ukrainian village and a little village, and we have a Chinatown, and you just go up and down the 77 and almost 78 neighborhoods in the city, and you experience something different because so many people bring something different to the community. I mean, it's just something that's beautiful, but sometimes because of that, the lack of resources that are translated into different languages, certain things are not as accessible, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, working through different communities and the ways that communities operate, especially knowing as there being a religious part of religious communities, that the divide between the state and the church should not be a permanent divide, meaning that severs people relationally, but that the divide should exist in order to honor religious liberty. But at the same time, relationships should be forged, because houses of worship, regardless of whether they're Christian or not, are oftentimes the best places to reach a community and to know what is actually taking place in the community, because ministers and people of faith and faith leaders often have a great pulse on what's going on. And so, those are some of the challenges that we face. But one of the things that I know is a pretty consistent experience is that, we're expected to be silent as Asian Americans, and then we're criticized for being silent. But then when we do speak up, we're oftentimes ignored. Right. And so navigating that tension is a real challenge.
Yeah. Now, it's my understanding that there have been efforts of solidarity between Black or African American and Asian American communities. So can you speak to some of the efforts or initiatives that have brought these two groups together in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, one of the beautiful things and the beautiful stories that aren't often told are kind of stories of solidarity between Asian Americans and African Americans, Asian Americans and Latinos, Asian Americans and indigenous communities. And those stories often get buried really quickly because they're not often covered by news reporters or media, and that they're not told over and over and over again in the same ways that stories of Christopher Columbus, like, for example, are told. And so most people don't know, like, the rich history of cross-racial solidarity that exists. At the same time, there are real tensions across different racialized minority communities as well as racialized communities, period, whether they're minority or majority. And over the pandemic, in one of the most difficult times that I think people in our country, people around the world have experienced, in addition to this global virus that was taking kind of over and shutting everything down, we also experienced a second wave, or like an emergence of a new pandemic, which was the persistence of anti-Asian and anti-Black and anti-Brown racism. And so one of the things that we've done is worked with different communities in the city, and so with the Latin church population, we hosted some roundtable discussions and panels. But with the African American community, especially as there was a rise in anti-Asian violence and the rise of anti-Black racism, especially experiencing a high level of pressure, we worked with a host of Black churches and Black church leaders and Black community members to embrace the cross-racial dynamic and move forward in solidarity together. And this is what we did. Shortly after George Floyd was murdered, or shortly before George Floyd was murdered, we put out a resource to talk about the interconnectedness between Black and Asian American Christians. And so we talked about the history of solidarity. Then shortly after after George Floyd was murdered, we organized a march that went from Chinatown to Bronzeville, where we went from a historic Chinese American church to a historic African American church, Progressive
Beautiful.
Baptist church.
Yeah.
And we had over, somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 people show up, and majority Asian Americans. Because when I was marching before with the Black pastors and other Black Christian leaders, they were always saying, like, where are the Asian Americans? I'm like, well, this is a city that has less than 5% Asian Americans. So I get the comments, but we're out here. In fact, you're talking to someone that's with you.
All right. Look at me. I'm here.
And at the same time, I would say, I hear you. We are going to do something. And I remember walking up MLK Drive, and, there was a kind of like a cynical African-American man crossing his arms, and, tens of thousands of people marching down his street. And, we stopped after and asked him, how is this, just seeing this? We tried to use his bathroom, but he wouldn't let us because of COVID. And he basically said, I just want to know if you guys are going to show up tomorrow. And I said, you know what? We might not show up here, but we're going to show up somewhere. And so we did show up. We showed up in that march, and we were surprised to see, almost 2,000 people show up. And it was really powerful, to the point where it got covered on ABC's Soul of a Nation on their Juneteenth special. So Chicago proudly is featured as a city celebrated for cross-racial solidarity in the spirit of so many other civil rights leaders. And so we've done a lot of good work together. And even with Bishop Horace Smith at Apostolic Faith Church, we hosted a panel for Black and Asian Americans to stand against racism, and that had tens of thousands of people tuning in, and then it was replicated in other cities throughout the country. And I think that was what's beautiful, is that Chicago could really lead the way on some of this stuff if we could figure out how to do that.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, since you're a pastor, and you've touched upon this already, but I just wanted to ask, can you expand on how religious communities can play a role in combating hate?
Yeah, I think the first thing we got to do is educate. I mean, part of our role is to teach. It's to help people understand. It's to help people kind of grow in their awareness of what's going on. Ignorance is the greatest enemy to solidarity. And if we want to perpetuate racism, we just have to let things exist as they are, because whether we like it or not, the system is designed to create this racial hierarchy. The way to adjust it is to address it. And so the way that we address it is by working together, by helping people understand who we are in light of one another. I'll give you a perfect example. One of the things I encouraged former students of mine to do was to learn about communities that you don't interact with, that you don't regularly interact with, but that exist within the region that you live in. And the reason I did that was because at some point when they would leave the college experience, they would have to interact with people that they never had interacted with. And if they had some awareness of them, even if it was just book awareness,
Sure.
like so much could be done. And I was encouraged to see how much transformation took place as a result of that. I think the other thing is that we have to speak up. Like, we just can't remain silent in the face of injustice, because injustice anywhere truly is an injustice everywhere. And so, I love when I hear at O'Hare when the announcements blare and say, if you see something, say something. I think that's what we got to do, is we got to say something when things are not right. And then, of course, I think we have to learn how to collaborate across differences, collaborate with people that we might not necessarily agree with. Even if we have a lot of different convictions, we can still agree on the fact that we share a common humanity. And that in and of itself is worth it for us to be sitting at a table, working out our differences, respecting each other in light of our differences, and then finding the things that we can press forward on for progress together.
Well, I love that answer. Here's the one question I'm going to ask you, and I've asked every single person in this podcast so far, and you just touched upon this as well. Now, in your opinion, what can our listeners do in their everyday lives to combat hate and discrimination?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest thing people can do is learn from people who are different from them. So move across the street towards the people that you might not normally interact with, and just ask them to tell you their story. People are full of incredible stories that are worth hearing. In fact, this is kind of what you're trying to do with this podcast.
Exactly.
And I appreciate you so much for doing this, and appreciate Commissioner Andrade for doing this as well. And just grateful for the ways in which you're trying to amplify stories of our shared humanity. And then I also think, to be civically engaged is a really important thing. Like, we are watching how, for example, I think our mayor, Mayor Johnson, did a wonderful job articulating why the city of Chicago maintained a sanctuary city status. And it's emboldening a lot of religious communities to say, you know what, if our city has our back, we think we can lean in with the city to do something with the city to protect the most vulnerable among us. And of course, we're not advocating for illegal immigration. We're not advocating for things that shouldn't happen, but we should certainly care for the vulnerable people in our midst. And the Bible, at least for me, tells me that we're supposed to care for the sojourner amongst us. And so because of that, to not just care for them by feeding them and showing them acts of mercy, but also to caring for them by advocating for them and then giving them safe haven is something that I think we can all do, because we see their humanity and the common thread of humanity that we share.
Absolutely, I agree, and that was an amazing answer. I've talked to other people in the podcast, and prior to actually coming on and recording, I feel, are not sure if there's a right or wrong answer to that question, and there really isn't, but I really love that answer. Well, Raymond Chang, thank you very much for your time in discussing Asian hate and the Asian American experience here in Chicago. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all your wisdom. And thank you very much to all of our listeners for tuning in today into the Think Before You Hate podcast. Remember, if you or anybody you know has experienced discrimination or feel that they have experienced discrimination, please do not hesitate to contact the Chicago Commission on Human Relations at 312-744-4111. Again, that is 312-744-4111. And please follow us on our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, we're on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and now Blue Sky. And until next time, remember, think before you hate.